Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Stargirl. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. But first and foremost, we get kind of our background on Brainwave, kind of understanding where his abilities came from. It seems like he experimented on himself because he had these ideas about like, oh, this is where we should go, but obviously other people, in his line of work were just kind of like, no, we're not going to do that. Because I guess they saw the dangers of the work and his funding got cut, so he decided to experiment on himself. But we see like the first instance of his powers kind of kicking in. He was defending himself because he was getting robbed by a guy, and the guy was even going to kill him. And Brainwave ended up killing the dude. And obviously we see like Henry watching these tapes, and obviously like he's literally going through this, like he's watching the video. And I think that's kind of a nice thing of like he's watching his dad go through all this, recording like his findings of about his abilities and stuff like that. And at the same time, Henry is kind of discovering things along with him. He hears his dad talk about the fact is the first person, obviously that dude he killed, it's like I killed him by accident. But the fact of the matter is, it's like he talks about the fact that he had read that guy's mind of like he had killed and hurt so many people before, and he was going to look to do the same thing to me. And it's so interesting because we see like it's so interesting to kind of understand Brainwave's whole thing. For him, it's like he was so powerless when he was younger, especially because like his dad did the whole story about the well. His dad holding him by the ankles, being like, "Disobey me again, I'll drop you." So it also shows you there's a cycle of abuse there, where it's like Brainwave's kind of abusive to Henry because his dad was abusive to him. And sadly, like history kind of repeats itself in that manner. So we can understand a little bit. Like we haven't gotten all the insight to like Henry and his dad's relationship, but enough of it to be like, okay, like you could tell just the way Henry was around his dad. Sometimes they'd be like, I should also preface that by saying Junior specifically. But Junior, anytime he's around his dad, it would just be a thing of him just being kind of like his dad seemed stern and just kind of like, I don't know. Like I said, we didn't get full insight, but the fact is his dad could read his son's mind almost too just seemed, once again, that's a whole complicated thing in itself. But the more and more like Henry's dad talked, it was more of a thing of like, okay, so like for him, he looks at people as terrible because he's like, I've been hearing all this stuff, like he reads people's minds all the time, so it's like he's hearing the most disgusting, terrible things that people think all the time. And so for him, it's like some guy was thinking some very nasty stuff, was it like on a train or what, something, so he made the guy blind. But the guy was panicking and it just became too much for Henry's dad's head, so he just pushed not telekinetically, I need to stop, I always like mix those words up, telekinetically pushed him in front of a car. So it's like it's no longer, because at least it's not excusable, but at the very least you could be like, the first instance of him using his power was self-defense, but now it's just like, no, because he sees like, oh, like, and that's the complicated thing. Like, should people be judged by the shit that goes through their head? Like, people have random thoughts in their head where it's like they can have, I mean, granted, said guy that he blinded and eventually pushed, yes, he had some terrible stuff on his mind, but that almost becomes that Minority Report thing. Should people be judged for crimes they haven't committed yet? So it's a thing of like, just because you have these awful thoughts, are you a terrible person for it because of that? And so obviously we see kind of why Brainwave easily went down his route he did. And it also explains why he got associated with the Injustice Society, because it's like, oh, this place sucks. We need to make humans better, So you can also see like Henry kind of slowly going down that route the more and more he hears people's thoughts. Another angle to this, though, it kind of reminds me of, I'm blanking on his name. It's the dude from season 2 of Cloak and Dagger. He kind of had this thing where basically he had pain that basically he passed it on to other people and it made him feel better. Basically, Brainwave kind of works the same way, because it's like people's thoughts are too much, but for him, it's like the moment he silenced those thoughts, he felt better until the next thought and the next person come about, So I just thought that was kind of an interesting aspect to all this, especially on the angle of like Courtney wanting to talk to Henry, because she's like, I can't imagine what he's going through, because she's like, not only did I hear what he was thinking, I felt what he felt. Like, she didn't expect it, because like Henry's kind of a dick. So for her, it's like they kind of see him so worried, so scared, so confused. It made her sympathetic to him. So it's like, I want to ask him for help. He might be able to help us find the rest of the ISA. Yolanda's super not happy about that. You can totally understand. It's like, after what Henry did to me, no. And Rick has her back because he's like, no, people don't change. But Beth is like, no, like that's not That's not true, and that's not fair. I mean, it's like, look at you, Rick. You've changed. I mean, we've all changed, but Rick is like, yeah, but I might have my issues, but I never sent out a picture of a girl the way Henry did to Yolanda. So it's like, he's a terrible person, so we can't trust him. Who knows if he's just going to serve us up to the ISA? I mean, he can't be trusted. I mean, he's Brainwave's kid. Granted, he didn't know all that at the time, but, you know, it's kind of like the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, does it? And I think that's such an interesting element. Once again, like, giving a villain a second chance, especially a villain that's never really been a villain. It's like, you know, should he be held to account for who his dad is? To be fair, he should definitely be held to account for what he did to Yolanda. But that's always a big question to me, is like, did he do what he did to Yolanda? I think maybe he sent the picture, he did share it with some people, maybe he shared it with the wrong person. It definitely seemed like he shared it with Cindy or whatever. Like, I felt like, I think for him, maybe he blames himself because he's like, it got out. It wasn't him directly who did it, but it got out because he had the photos and he was sharing it with his friends, so he thought maybe it got out like that. I believe it got out because of Yolanda, like, because she was texting, not Yolanda, I'm sorry, Cindy, sorry. I think the pictures of Yolanda got sent out by Cindy because she was on her phone right before her shit blew up at the school, you know, so that's why but, we'll kind of have to, you know, see on that front. But Yolanda's not too happy about this whole thing. Obviously, you know, Pat's trying to keep Beth and Rick looking into the systems underneath Blue Valley, because he's like, the fact of the matter is what Beth found at Cindy's house plus what Courtney had found at the school shows that there's connecting like passageways and stuff underground, so we need to research it. But Rick's not as much interested in that. He's trying to decipher his dad's notes. It's like, my parents were killed for a reason, and I'm curious about it. I mean, granted, it is about the whole, like, well, they were part of the JSA, so I'm sure there's that, but maybe it never crossed my mind to think there was much more than that. I guess because maybe Rex had figured out what they were up to, like, even back then, so maybe that's what the notes have, you know, keys to figuring out what they're up to. So there's all of that. I did think it was interesting, ultimately, the conversation between Courtney and her dad. I mean, not Courtney, between her dad, sorry. Courtney and Henry about the whole situation. Because, once again, Henry's even suggesting, like, maybe everything that happened to those people, if my dad killed people, it's because he had a reason to. It's like, because he's like, people are monsters, people are terrible. And then she's like, what about Joey? Was Joey bad? And she's like, but even Henry's like, no, he was a good kid, right? So it's like, but for him, he wants to believe, like, you know, because having heard all these people's thoughts, he's like, yeah, he figures he's got people figured out. But I like what Courtney says, like, yes, people can be bad, but people can also be good too. Yes, these people probably had some terrible thoughts, but that's all. You're probably only reading what's on the surface. You're probably not reading what's deep, because like what someone thinks isn't 100%. Once again, it's a complicated thing, because when we have a terrible faults, it's like, maybe it plays into some truth of who you are, but at the same time, like, people can have fleeting terrible thoughts of just like, because there's that guy that's like, oh, I can't wait for her to die, so because his guy's like, I guess it's his mom or someone that's related to him, he's like, oh, when she dies, I'll get the house and the car, and he's just looking at Henry and he smiles. It's like, the smiling, like, oh, hey there, young man, while having these terrible thoughts. But it's like, there can be fleeting thoughts that don't have to 100% define you for who you are. So, and that's the thing, once again, it's like, can you really be okay with everything your dad's done? But I think for him, it's probably him just trying to justify, because like, no, this is my dad we're talking about. But Courtney talks about the fact is, it's like, your dad, like, I can't imagine growing up in this situation you did with him as your father, because Yolanda told me about the way your dad treats you and stuff like that, which obviously that kind of upsets Henry, because it's a thing of like, don't act like you know me, you don't know our situation, don't talk about my dad like that, even though he is, you know, it's complicated. I mean, especially for her, because it's like, he's part of the said group that, you know, killed her dad, so obviously she's gonna feel a way about it. What I thought was interesting, though, is there's the dude with the sword and everything, the janitor. Like, what happened is, like, for a second, he was there with the staff in his hand. He's like, oh, he drops it. And I was like, so is that supposed to be like is that what that's supposed to be hinting at? Like, well, because they talked about it a little bit about the dude who made the staff. They brought it up a tiny bit, but obviously it's not something that, you know, Pat's well versed in, like, where, you know, the cosmic staff came from and everything. So maybe there's some connection there. Part of me was thinking, like, is that supposed to be could he have been a previous owner to it before Sylvester got it, or was he like a previous Starman type of situation? But I'd assume not. Well, because like what kind of confuses me every time I see Starman is just because I'm like, is that Joe McHale? It looks like it was only Joe McHale in the first episode. Maybe it has been every other time, but his face looks different. I don't know whether it's a different person every other time the character's popped up. He just looks different. It doesn't look like Joe McHale, so that's what kind of confuses me. So I don't know. Like, I've never read too much into it, so I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if I'm reading too much into that. But that's why I was wondering. I was like, is that Night Dude actually supposed to be Starman? But I mean, he died, right? So not unless he came back. But like I said, not unless he's just like a previous owner of the staff, because that dude could be like, you know, God knows how old. Like, he could be like a long eternal night or something that's just popped up from time to time. Because we also learned from Pat, like, he was a part of this group known as like the Seven, and it was like. Which immediately when I hear like Seven and stuff like that, it makes me think of The Boys. But to be fair, it applies to the Justice League too, because when you think of the Seven, you're hitting like the big timers. You know, your Batman, your Superman, your Wonder Woman, your Flash, your Green Lantern, your Martian Manhunter, and your Cyborg. That's typically like your heavy hitters, like your main core seven when it comes to the Justice League and stuff like that. But even Pat being like, yeah, we used to kind of argue about the name and everything. But for him, it's like, and I like that too, being like, oh yeah, it was a group before the JSA and everything. And for him, it's like, we, you know, saved New York from some stuff. The fact of the matter is, we even saved the world. They never got the recognition that JSA did, but still, which is like, oh, so that's interesting to know that you've been a part of multiple. I mean, to be fair, it's interesting because in the superhero world, like, everyone belonged to a different team at some point in time. Like, you could be part of the Young Justice League to eventually join the Justice League. Obviously, look at, you know, the Teen Titans. Eventually, like, oh, you're with the Teen Titans. Then eventually you might grow up and not grow up because that sounds, you know, inconsiderate to the Titans. You could end up becoming part of the Justice League. So it's interesting how that stuff can, you know, correlate like that. So it's interesting to think about that, because I guess in my head I always think like, if you're part of one squad, you're just that squad. It just never crosses my mind to think about, yeah, you could be in multiple squads. You could be one squad. You could start here and there, you know. So it's just fleeting thoughts I have. What I thought was interesting too, I should circle back, is that Beth went by Cindy's place. It's like no heat signatures. And so it's like, oh yeah, she went studying with her mother abroad. And Beth's like, yeah, sure. So it's a thing of like, she's in the sewers. I am curious like what happened to like her quote unquote mother, her second mother. And Cindy's locked up in her, she's asking her dad, she's like, let me out, come on, please. She tried to come after me and I would have killed her if you hadn't gotten my way and stuff like that. But I also thought was interesting where she just kind of stops and she's like, I'm going to kill you like I killed Mom. And then he walks over and she's like, I knew you couldn't lock up your daughter. And he closes the door and she's like, hey, she tries to slashes her way out of there, but she can't. He's like, use the gas. It used to calm her as a baby, which is like, Jesus, you used to gas your baby. Okay, that's, I mean, we already kind of see that Ito isn't the best father, considering the fact this kind of turned his daughter into the, I'd go ahead and say monster just because of her personality and everything, but just literally the shivs coming out of her arm and everything. Like, you can kind of lean into like, yeah, your dad kind of did that too, which is kind of, you know, effed up in its own right. But obviously he sits down with the ISA, and I love that literally everyone's just kind of off on edge around him, like, because he's like, yeah, I know we've had our differences, because literally the fiddler, she literally scoots over when he sits down. He's just like, I get it, we have our issues, but the fact of the matter is, we don't need Brainwave. We don't need to wait for him to wake up. His son's got the power. So basically their idea is to basically mind control people into being the perfect version of themselves. It's like a very like trying to create like a utopia, this new America. Basically, they want to use the satellite to amplify the abilities to control people's mind. You make them think a certain way. You shift their behavior. You control their thoughts. You get them kind of almost like in this unity of one mind, and that new mind is this new America project. They're starting off with 6 states, and I guess that's going to be their way to kind of, you take these 6 states and you swing the way certain things in the country work. You know, you start off slow, but then, because they didn't talk about whether or not they plan on expanding that to the entire country. Is it just going to be like, you're going to start off in these 6 states so you can swing certain things in your favor, maybe politically, or get the country running the way you kind of want it to, like through that way, and will they eventually spread it across the entire U.S.? I mean, it sounds like it's just America. They have no plans for world domination type of stuff, you know? Once again, at least when it comes to Icicle, it seems like him out of anyone has the most altruistic, you know, I mean, granted, he's going about it the way he's going about it, but it's like, in his mind, it's like he's trying to make this a better world, or, you know, better country at the very least for his, you know, child, for each one of their children, you know, so they're, you know, that's what brings them together and all of this. So, What's interesting too about Icicle is it seems like, Jordan ends up, talking about the project. Like the dude he killed, was that last episode? Or yeah, I think that was the last episode. That dude he killed, it seems like that was the last one on his list about getting revenge for his wife. And it's like, he almost feels like he's like, because of this project, I sacrificed so much time that I wasn't there for wasn't there a lot for my son. So for him, it's like, he feels like he hoped that he'd feel better after everything. And it's like, even though he got revenge, it still didn't satisfy him. It's just, but he's like maybe kind of filling that in by, working on this new project, the New America, as well as, spending time with his family and stuff. So Barbara invites him, or at least he kind of suggests that like they get together for dinner and stuff like that. So Jordan and Cameron, along with his family, are coming over, and I'm like, oh, that's interesting. Villains and heroes having dinner together. That's definitely going to be interesting, and it ended up being a very interesting situation in the first place. I also thought it was interesting that Yolanda ends up attacking Henry. And for him, he's like, wait, you think just because of what I did to you, I deserve to die? She's like, you can read my thoughts, right? And so she's like, you hurt me. She's like, I trusted you. I loved you, and you did that to me. For her, it's like, Courtney believes that you still have a soul. She's like, I know you don't. So stay away from her. Stay away from my friends. And she kind of bounces. And I'm curious to see, because now I think Henry he has all these thoughts about everyone else being a monster, but then it's like you say all that, you're in people's thoughts, seeing them being monsters, but you have someone that sees you as a monster. Your dad was kind of seen as a monster by Courtney. It's like, after everything, because it's like, she had to explain like, oh, I did what I did not on purpose. I mean, he was literally defending myself. He was threatening to kill my mom and me, so that was out of self-defense. Once again, that's kind of how, and it's not like he's dead, but, it's just kind of like his brain's messed with. So there's that. We'll kind of, since we're on the topic of it and everything, that guy shows up later on. He's a lawyer. He's like, oh yeah, your dad, he wanted to be taken off life support after some time. But then Henry's reading the dude's mind, and it's like, you're lying. He's like, yeah, because I need the money. I guess as a lawyer, whatever payout like Henry would get from all of this, he'd get a portion of it. But it's like, wait, you're lying. You just want my dad dead. He's like, the guy's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. But inside his head, he's like, oh my God, I'm a terrible liar. The kid knows. But he uses his power and ends up knocking the guy out, or at least potentially killing him, if not killed him. Which is like, oh, now we see Henry definitely shifting in that direction. But then his dad wakes up, so that's definitely interesting. And him being like, Junior, what's going on? Which is so interesting because it seemed like he was able to reach out to Henry, not less this is all a ploy where he's going to come back having a different personality because his brain was kind of a little rattled. It could simply be that, because, people have come out of situations like that with a different personality. Obviously, there have been instances of like, oh, they literally speak in a different accent. So it could be a situation that him coming out of that, he could be like a better person because of it. Or once again, that could just be him playing along. We'll kind of have to, wait and see on, that front. But obviously, dinner is interesting. There's a look on Pat's face with the whole situation with Jordan when Jordan's there and everything. He's almost got this squinty look like, yeah, sure. I don't know. It seemed like something about Jordan kind of rubbed Pat the wrong way. Especially, you could tell, it's like, oh, Jordan's heavily pushing his New America agenda without really, it's like, oh, the fact of the matter is kind of alluding to it. I'm like, you're really just they wouldn't, because they don't associate you with the ISA, they wouldn't think much of it. To be fair, they don't know what the ISA's plan is for the New America. So, for Jordan to literally be laying out his plan, right there in front of Barbara and her family, it kind of coincides. Because he's basically doing what he's doing during the day. He's just doing the more dark side of it, with the ISA. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. But you have Courtney getting the food. And I love that it's like, oh, Jordan's like, can he get some more? And Pat's like, yeah. And then Mike comes over and scoops out the last, but he's like, yeah, Dad, it looks like it's gone. And it's like, he's like, yeah, Mike, I can see that. I was like, that's such a douchey little move. I love it. And then Courtney burns her hands on it. I was like, is this going to go where I think it is? She brings it over to Jordan's like, go ahead. Jordan picks it up like it's nothing. And it's like, Courtney's the only one that sees it. She's like, what? And then she kind of realizes, like, shit. And she brings Pat to the kitchen. I think he's Icicle. But then it turns into conversations like, wait, if he's Icicle, do you think Cameron's like Cindy? And that becomes a question. Is Is he like Cindy in the fact that he knows exactly what his dad's up to, everything, or is he more in line with Henry, where Henry is like who knew nothing, who is currently learning more? Once again, it comes down to a thing of like how much she knew and when, so that makes her a little awkward around Cameron because she actually likes Cameron, but now it's like, I don't know whether I should trust you or not, because now I got the feeling that your dad is Icicle, and what's that make for you and who you are, So obviously she wants to get the staff and everything. She's like, okay, we need to go, maybe it can read his energy or whatever, and we could tell, it could be able to tell if he's Icicle or not, which I love Pat being like, no, we're not doing anything until we tell your mom the truth, because he wouldn't tell her earlier, but then, you have Courtney stopping him. But I love that the moment they're down, they're trying to talk about this. Lo and behold, Barbara walks in. She's like, what is that? And they're like, and the staff was glowing, and then it just like kind of died and just like fell, which is like, I love moments like this, because it reminds me of literally Peter getting caught twice in the MCU Spider-Man movies, because it's like, first he got caught by his best bud, and now Ned, and now it's like at the very end he gets caught by his aunt, so it's like, it's very similar to that, and she's like, what is that? And it's like, oh, you got some explaining to do, so that's going to be interesting. Once again, didn't want to tell him from the beginning, because it's like, didn't want her to know because she'd be too worried, she'd stop all of this, but it's like, that's going to be interesting when you have to explain, okay, so I'm going out there doing the superhero thing. Pat, how could you let her do this? Also, wait, Pat, you were part of a superhero team? You've lied to me? I thought I knew you. So that's going to be some relationship issues. Question is, are you going to tell Mike? I wouldn't think Mike be the type to run his mouth off about it, but still, probably better that he doesn't know, which I love that she found out. I mean, because they could have easily gone the entire season never letting Barbara find out, that it always stayed like Pat and Courtney's secret, but now it's out. No, I mean, to be fair, like, Pat wanted to tell her the entire time. It's like, didn't want their relationship obviously built on the foundation of a lie, even though you can make the argument it technically was, because he never disclosed everything right from the beginning, so there's all of that. So now we find ourselves in this very, very interesting situation, and I'm curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.